Inspiration sparks and raises our vibration, encouraging all of us to live our best lives. It is my pleasure to welcome our speaker for this evening, Norma Turner. The Reverend Dr. Norma J. Turner has a long history of service in spiritual ministry and education, having taught adults for over 35 years and served in pastoral ministry for many years as well. Norma joined spiritualism over 15 years ago. A gifted speaker and a friendly personality with a sense of humor, Norma tries to bring light and life to all she meets. A warm Harmony Harbor welcome to Norma.
Thank you. Good. She remembered. Much has been written on the higher self. And one major author on this topic is Deepak Chopra, who described it as the most authentic state of being that we've lost touch with in modern life. If you go to Amazon and look up higher self, you will find at least 25 books written on the subject with the words higher self in the title. You can even buy audiobooks 1 and 2 on the higher self, written by Deepak Chopra, in eBay for $25, or a used book with that title for $5. It would seem that the higher self is a hot topic. But I'm going to be speaking about another author, one that I feel more comfortable with discussing. Alan W. Watts was born on January 6th, 1915, and passed on November 16th, 1973. He was an English writer, speaker, and self-styled philosophical entertainer, known for relating and integrating Eastern and Western religious philosophies. Why did I select this author? Because on my journey through religious philosophies, I have seen the relationship between Eastern religions, specifically Hinduism, and Western spiritual movements in postmodern America. However, the concept of the higher self is not endemic to most Western religions. As a thriving member of the Roman Catholic Church in the past, having pursued 16 years of Catholic education, I never really heard about the higher self. It was something that just wasn't in my vocabulary. It was a mystery to me until I heard it being used in association with like Alcoholics Anonymous and some New Age movements. Throughout 20 years as a religious sister in a religious congregation, I never learned about the higher self either. And note, I literally read every book in the small convent library on spirituality. That's because that's what one does when doesn't know how to meditate. I had to be doing something. Anyway, I have since become familiar with the writings of Alan Watts and want to share with you today the insights about one's higher self that I have gained. Alan Watts wrote about such an individual in his book called The Book on the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. Now, the following is a bit paraphrased. Deep down, we all carry a certain level of resonance with these words, that is, the higher self. We recognize that there is something mysterious within us, something sacred. What few of us manage to come to terms with, however, is that our higher self totally goes beyond our conditioned fears, limiting beliefs, wounds, and ego fixations. It actually represents our most authentic state of being that we've lost touch with in modern life. However, while our higher selves are completely free, they can be blocked or repressed by the limited ego, like a horde of dark clouds smothering the sun. You are an aperture, an opening through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. Looking at the higher self from a different perspective, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Every man is a divinity in disguise, a god playing the fool." I took that from goodreads.com because I couldn't find my original source. Every man and woman is a divinity in disguise, a god playing the fool. Yet, despite all the writings on the subject and a quite thorough theological background, I still didn't know what was meant by that higher self. I'm a practical person, and while I am a philosopher, I want to know how a philosophical concept affects me. What do I have to do or say to embrace this higher self? I read in another source, which I don't remember at this point, that if we want to seek our higher self, we need to do away with any evidence of the lower self. Negative or petty thoughts, deeds, those sinful attitudes and behaviors associated with the 7 deadly sins or betrayal of the 10 commandments. Many of us know which areas tend to take root in our minds and actions. Now, to me, the higher self began to make some sense in a more concrete way. In mediumship classes, to begin our work, we would sing a rousing song like "Row, row, row your boat," or "This little light of mine." The important purpose of singing was to clear our minds of those nasty, vengeful, angry thoughts that arose from our lower selves. However, I wanted more information on how to achieve knowledge of the higher self. What actually is this higher self? I borrowed a story that I found on the internet to help explain exactly how the higher self functions in our lives. Once there was a great ocean. All of existence was birthed from this great ocean, lived off this great ocean, and returned back to the great ocean. In the beginning, millions and millions of tiny rivers sprung from this great ocean. Each river snaked across the land like delicate veins. But one day, a great drought came. No one saw it coming. The scorching sun dried up each snaking river so greatly that they all turned into lakes. No longer were they connected to the great ocean, so they felt great loneliness and isolation. As time went by, each little lake became more and more depressed, forgetting about the great ocean. One day, a shaman came to drink from one of the lakes. He noticed that the lake was depressed. "Why are you so sad?" he asked. The lake, despondent and gloomy, responded, "Because I'm nearly dried up, and there is little water left. Time is running out. Soon I will be gone forever." The shaman peered intently at the lake and laughed hysterically. Silly lake, don't you know that you are created to the great ocean, connected to the great ocean? Although you change, you are changeless. Your water evaporates and returns back to the great ocean. It is then reborn, repurposed, and redistributed. How can you live or die? You are birthless and deathless. You are in all things. You are all things. Now, this story does require some consideration, but the reality is there. That is, each of us is connected to the infinite Godhead. The problem is that many of us really do not respect the marvelous entity that we are. Too many of us can claim to be experts in this particular issue, that is, the failure to love ourselves. And there are many wealthy therapists out there who can attest to this. But each of us is so unique, so special, so selected to be a precious individual. I'm not talking about only talents and wealth and position. I'm referring to the fact, and now here's my scientific self. I'm referring to the fact that of all the 2 million sperm floating up that canal, only the strongest made it into the egg. And it was first come, first served. Now, we won't go into the 3 types of twins and multiples that have been born over the years. We're keeping this simple. We will just discuss the individual fertilization process. But think of it. Out of 2 million sperm, about 200 make it to the egg, and only 1 can enter that egg, locking all the others out. Each one of us is not just 1 in a million. We are 1 in 2 million. This material does come from the Cleveland Clinic, where they did studies. That makes us, however, so unique, so special, so selected. But notice I did not say haughty or uppity. No, we recognize that each of us was selected to be on this earth and do our thing, whatever that might be. We have a purpose, a reason for being here, regardless of what anyone else might say to us or has said to us. Deep within ourselves, we know we are not just flesh and blood. Rather, we have that wise and ancient part of us within us that transcends the body. Some are more sensitive to it than others, depending upon their background and upbringing. But we realize that deep within us, we have this innermost core, a divine essence that we call the soul. Now, we know the higher self exists, but how? Somehow, even though we don't quite understand the concept, we still respond to it. When we realize there is something mysterious within us, it can be held as something sacred. The higher self actually represents our most authentic state of being that we have lost touch with in our modern life. This is the 3rd time I've made that statement. Thank you, Emerson. Somehow our higher self can be stifled by the limitations of the ego. Therefore, the fact that we must work to allow that soul to develop, we realize that on a spiritual path, the higher self has a role to play in our existence. Alan Watts noted, this is a quote, "You are an aperture or opening through which the universe is looking at and exploring ourselves. Through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. Now, do we really understand that? Through the ages, cultures and gurus, poets, teachers, and mystics have referred to that inner divine spark, our higher self, to help humankind develop beyond our ego-oriented limitations. We also know that development is not always easy. We need to move from our beliefs that we are separate, isolated, and totally independent of all others. That development begins when we realize that we are the river flowing from the great ocean. The river represents the higher self. The great ocean represents spirit, source, the unity of all of us. Spiritual development is a responsibility that will bring us a sense of inner stillness, calm, compassion, and greater awareness of who we are. Because some of us are more pragmatic, it is important to realize, I just need to find my place here, that we have to deal with a mind that tends to go berserk at times. Well, maybe not berserk. Let me change that. We, as humans in this world, are trying to meet the needs of family and friends and are constantly following different schedules. Watts refers to it as monkey brain, a monkey mind. The important thing to realize is that our higher self is not waiting for us sometime in the future. We can access it now, sitting in our homes, focusing on the present moment. For many of us, to overcome some of the hazards of being raised in what many of us would call dysfunctional families, I would add that because a family didn't meet all the criteria laid out in a human development text, that doesn't mean the family was dysfunctional. But that's a topic for another talk. However, as mentioned earlier, we may need to overcome some of the messages we received during that early development. As a result, the idea of sitting and listening to that voice deep within us may prove quite difficult. As a result, I found that Alan Watts' practice of integrating spirituality and psychology very helpful. To connect with the higher self, try establishing a regular meditation practice. Explore different meditation techniques to determine what works best for you. Even if you begin with a 5-minute period of silence, it is a start. Allowing love into your life is also important, and your heart offers a path to your soul. The more you love, the more life expands, and the more deeply you can embody your higher self. That is why learning to love yourself is so important in spirituality. We've perhaps all heard that phrase many times. Love your neighbor as yourself. My goal today was to highlight the importance of paying attention to our higher self with greater knowledge and awareness of what the higher self is and how it functions in our lives. Let us proceed in our spiritual development, moving toward greater compliance with our higher selves. and may each of you live with peace and joy. God bless you all.